Hi, my name is Alexander Falcone, and I'm a student of emergency management here at Florida State University. Today, I'd like to talk about citizen responsibility during times of disaster. I'd like to look at this issue from this point of view of an emergency manager and also from the point of view of a family. I think it's important that we understand the perspectives of both of these groups in order to understand how they can better work together. So, starting from the point of view from an emergency manager, our goals are to prevent, deaths, protect property, and also prevent harm to the environment. When your community is faced with a disaster, these are your primary objectives. So, what's our community made of? Our community is made of organizations. They might be churches. It's nonprofit organizations, schools, and things along that nature. A big part of our community is also the business community. We have to take into account the economy of our community and how that's going to affect our citizens. So, when you take a deeper look at all these organizations I mentioned, what are they made up of? They're made up of families. They're made up of people. They're citizens in our community. Whether you're looking at private businesses, nonprofit organizations, or even your first responders, many of these people will be impacted by the disaster that hits your community. So, take for example first responders. They're in the community, they live in the community, and they're going to be affected by the disaster just as everyone else is. So your police and fire and EMS, who are supposed to be there to help with the disaster, are also impacted by the disaster. So it's important that we understand how we can prepare our citizens in order to help us better do our job as emergency managers. Now, when we look at these options, it really boils down to three core concepts. We need to formulate a plan, we need to have a survival kit, and we also need to implement home mitigation. And these are the three factors that if citizens follow, they will be more prepared to deal with disaster. So, beginning with formulating a plan, it's important to understand and know your family, your home, and your community. If we want to have all of these different entities work together towards a common goal, we have to understand how we all fit together, just like the pieces of a puzzle. Now, it's long been known, and it's been a focus of emergency management, that we know that our citizens need to be prepared. Starting back with the leadership of James Lee Witt under the Clinton administration, he started Project Impact, which is building disaster-resistant communities. And when we look across the country, we can see evidence of these projects. If you look at South Florida, for example, in 2005, we were hit with 4 different hurricanes, and the citizens largely were prepared for the storms. Many citizens had the proper resources, they had survival kits, and they knew where to go and which proper authorities to turn to for help. Now, following with that leadership, under the leadership of Craig Fugate, we're focusing on a personal preparedness standard. You look at, we call people disaster survivors instead of disaster victims. And the language and vocabulary that we use definitely can impact the way that people view themselves and also view their situations. So, with that said, how do we build our community and how do we strengthen our citizen population to make them more resilient to disasters? Well, it's pretty simple. Education. When you look at citizen responsibility, the citizens are not going to be able to uphold their responsibilities if they're not educated and informed as to what these are. So returning back to our 3 core principles, we have formulate a plan, have a survival kit, and also participate in home mitigation. One of the most important aspects is the formulation of a plan. What are you going to do if you're at work and a disaster strikes? Do you have people who depend on you? Take, for example, a 4-person family. You just say father, mother, 2 children, and let's say a dog as well. So what are you going to do if a sudden disaster happens, such as an earthquake or flash flooding, and your children are at school or your wife is at work? It depends, you need to work with your family to understand what needs you have. Where are we going to meet up? What are we going to do? With certain disasters such as hurricanes, you have a long onset, so you have time to plan. You need to realize, should we evacuate? Where are shelters at? Do we have family nearby that are in a safe location? These are all factors that would be part of the citizens' plans to better help themselves. During times of disaster, communication can be confusing and it can be overwhelming. And it's important that citizens have a plan in place and understand their family's needs in order to better help those that are trying to help them. So, the second tenet we're looking at is a survival kit. you could go to a website, ready.gov, which I think is an excellent resource. And it outlines what you need. You need 3 days of food, you need water, you need medical supplies, flashlights, cooking supplies, wrenches, things that people may not necessarily think of when they're inside their homes. So people need to understand that it might take up to 3 days for emergency personnel to be able to begin assisting them. If conditions are bad, the first responders, the fire department, they're not going to be able to come out to help you if you're in a situation where you might need help. The third big issue is home mitigation, and this is a important factor that citizens can take and can help themselves with. The structural integrity of your home. When homes are being constructed, we can emphasize home mitigation so that they're built with more quality materials and are built up, if you're in a hurricane area, built to hurricane force winds. You could also make sure that your home's properly fitted with shutters, that you have hurricane resistant glass and doors, and also that you're not building in a floodplain. Another thing that many homes could do is if you are built in a floodplain, you can raise your home. In Hurricane Sandy, for example, a lot of homes up in New Jersey are actually raised with crawl spaces underneath them. So an important mitigation tool is that we can simply raise the houses above the floodplain. So it's simple actions like this. If citizens are aware and if citizens are willing to work with the authorities, we can have a better prepared community, which eventually will save property and lives. Thank you for listening.